You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussion, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
And welcome back to Reason and Theology, everyone. Your host, Michael, on a Friday. Let me know if y'all are having any trouble hearing me with the audio. I think all the settings are good, but just double checking here. If y'all can notify me in the comment section. I want to address some comments made by Cardinal Marx recently on the issue of same-sex unions. Very, very troubling comments that, as a son of the church, I would like to challenge charitably, because I think that they are harmful and in error. But before we do that, I do want to mention our sponsor for this video, and that is, of course, realestateforlife.org. Be sure to check them out if you need a realtor who shares your beliefs, and if you need to buy or sell a home, you definitely want to check them out. Again, realestateforlife.org. Okay. Let's see here. Somebody says I look like someone's godparent for chrismation. That's hilarious. That's funny. Let me see if I can do my Godfather impression here. Make him an offer you can't refuse. So yeah, there you go. Although I actually am a godfather, but of course I don't talk that way. So again, this content from Cardinal Marx is very troubling. Not surprised. I mean, I've seen stuff like this from Cardinal Marx and others, but it seems like it's continuing to circulate, especially in Germany. So I think it's worth addressing. Let me share my screen so that y'all can follow along with the article. Y'all should be able to see that. There we go. All right. So, okay. March 31. This is from Catholic World Report. There's Cardinal Marx at a queer mass, from what it looks like. Very, very troubling. Marx said in an interview published on Thursday that the Catechism of the Catholic Church is not set in stone, and one is allowed to doubt what it says. What I've noticed that people often do in these discussions, intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know. I don't know what his motives are, and I don't really care to speculate what his motives are. Doesn't matter to me what his intentions are. At the end of the day, this is misleading and harmful. Okay, what I do notice people do is, whenever we have these discussions about same-sex unions and same-sex acts, they always use this sleight of hand, however you want to call it. They use this trick where they talk about an issue that's actually not on the table, that's not in dispute. Nobody is disputing whether or not the Catechism in general is set in stone. Obviously, there are some things in the Catechism that are open for reform, and then there are other things in the Catechism that are not open for reform. The way that you determine this is the Catechism in and of itself doesn't carry any kind of authority. It doesn't add to the authority of any magisterial proposition that it contains, but the weight of each proposition is determined by its source, right? The source that it's quoting. So if it quotes the Council of Nicaea on the homoousios of Jesus with the Father, that's obviously going to be definitive because that's based on the Council of Nicaea. Whereas if it's quoting certain issues on ecology that are not definitive, it's not going to be definitive. It's going to be based on whatever the source that it's drawing from. That's how authoritative it is. Its mere existence in the Catechism doesn't make it irreformable. So nobody's disputing whether or not the Catechism is set in stone. The question is the Catechism's expression on same-sex acts. Can that be revised? Is that set in stone? Well, it depends on where is the church in the catechism getting this teaching from? Well, it's getting it from something that, in my estimation, is irreformable. That is what we would call an undefined dogma. It hasn't been solemnly defined anywhere. But I do believe the ordinary and universal magisterium has definitively excluded same-sex unions and has taught that it is immoral definitively. Not solemnly, but non-solemnly. Therefore, it's an undefined dogma, and that would make it irreformable. So again, nobody is disputing whether or not the catechism is set in stone. The question is the church's teaching that the catechism expresses on the immorality of same-sex acts and unions set in stone? And the answer there is going to be yes, in the same way that the catechism's teaching on Jesus being consubstantial with the Father is set in stone. That's not up for grabs. Because again, it's based on something that has been definitively taught. So it really just depends on what teaching we're referring to in the catechism. But sure, its mere existence in the catechism doesn't make it irreformable. What makes it irreformable is the magisterial means that has taught that teaching elsewhere. Okay, so let's continue. The Cardinal made the comments in a 7-page spread on March 31st edition of the Weekly Current, blah, 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 whatever. Marx, the Archbishop of Munich and Freising, is one of the most influential Catholic leaders in Europe, serving as a member of Pope Francis's Council of Cardinals and Advisors. And I do think that is troubling. I think that, was it less than a year ago that Cardinal Marx tried to resign and Pope Francis wouldn't allow him to? I think that's problematic. Pope Francis has a hand in this, indirectly then. I'm not saying that Pope Francis affirms what Cardinal Marx is doing here, but he's responsible for it. That much is certain. I think we can respectfully criticize Pope Francis for that. Again, I don't know exactly what his thoughts are on this interview as far as Pope Francis, but at the very least, they're not enough for him to say you're excommunicated, because I think that this isn't something new for Cardinal Marx, and Pope Francis, I imagine, is aware, at least to some extent, of Cardinal Marx's perspective. So, okay. So I do think some fair criticism can be leveled against Pope Francis for even continuing to allow this individual to operate in the church. He spoke about the catechism in response to a question about how homosexual, queer, or trans people are to be accommodated in Catholic teaching. People are to be accommodated. That's not the issue. People are to be, but of course the question is whether their acts should be considered good. That's the problem. All right, he said, an inclusive ethic that we envision is not about being lax, as some claim. It is about something else, encounter at eye level, respect for the other. I don't know who is disputing, who is out there saying we should be disrespectful to people who struggle with same-sex attraction or transgenderism. Who is saying that? I'm not aware of who these people are. That sure isn't my position. Of course we need to be respectful and loving to them. They're made in God's image. These are people who have eternal souls. And of course we should love them. And we should be there for them as they're struggling with sin, just in the same way that I want the church to be there for me, and I want others to be there for me with my struggles with sin. So that's not up for debate. Of course we should have respect for the other. I did not know that was in question. To me, this is a red herring. The value of love is shown in the relationship. Okay, well, now we have a problem. Nobody's saying that, people who struggle with same-sex acts or transgender people are not able to love. We all know that they're capable of loving. The question is the object of their love disordered or not? That's the question. So he said, and not making the other person an object, and not using or humiliating the other person. Is that all that it is? Is that all that the the ob, the object of one's love is? Is as long as you just don't make them an object, it's okay? Of course, that doesn't work for adultery. That doesn't work for pedophilia. That doesn't work for any other expression. Any other object, I should say. So that's not good enough. Again, I think that this is a red herring. In being faithful and dependable to each other, again, that's not the problem. The question is not, um, can people who are in same-sex unions be faithful to one another? Yes, they can, but that doesn't answer the question, is the object of their affection and love disordered? Are they placing it in a disordered object, if you will? Um, that's the question, and I see it always sidestepped, and they go down this rabbit trail and talk about the goodness of being faithful to each other and their ability to love. That's not in question. Of course, two people are able to be faithful to one another, and there is goodness and love. The question is, should they have a sexual love for each other? That's the question. Not can they be faithful to each other, and are they capable of expressing love? The catechism is not set in stone. One may also doubt what it says. No, one may doubt and I wouldn't even use the word doubt. I would say one may question, in rare cases, non-definitive teachings that maybe the catechism expresses. In rare cases, that's an option. Um, but clearly, for things that are definitive, that's not the case, right? Can we doubt the Christological teachings in the Catechism? Can we doubt the Trinity? Is this idea of just doubting what's in the Catechism just indiscriminate? Of course not. So, is it theoretically possible to doubt something in the Catechism, in the sense that we may struggle with giving religious submission of intellect and will to a non-definitive teaching? Yes, but that's not what's in question here, because we're speaking in the context of same-sex acts. So this is now in relation to a teaching that is considered definitive. So no, one may not doubt what it says on this issue. Um, let's continue. He went on. We discussed these questions during the family synod, but there was reluctance to set something down. Um, Hold on one second. Give me one moment. Sorry about that. I heard my son that was coming out of the house, needed to make sure he gets back in. All right. So he went on. We discussed these questions during the family synod, but there was a reluctance to get something down. Even then, I said there are people living in intimate love relationships, an intimate love relationship that is expressed sexually. Okay, so here he's saying that there are people who are engaging in same-sex acts that are living in a love relationship, and it expresses itself sexually. Well, that's the problem. What the church has always taught, and what is definitive as an undefined dogma, is that same-sex acts are always immoral. Same-sex sexual acts are always immoral. So that's the key right there. It doesn't matter that they're in a loving relation. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Because if the act itself is immoral, then it doesn't matter if they love each other. Their love for each other is being expressed in a disordered way. They should love each other in a non-sexual, platonic way. But of course he doesn't believe that, right? Of course he doesn't believe that same-sex acts are immoral, and that's the problem. And I'm going to say, okay, well, upon what basis do you say that there are any sexual sins, any sexual acts that are sinful? Upon what basis? Because this one is contrary to the natural law and it's contrary to definitive church teaching. So if we throw this one out, I mean, on what basis do you say that any other sexual act is immoral, bestiality, or pedophilia? On what basis? Consent? Is that really what we're going to boil this down to? Consent, mere consent? What if somebody does consent to it and they're 14 years old and they want to consent to acts with somebody who's 40? Oh, well, they're not 18. Okay, but that's arbitrary. Upon what basis do you say 14? What about 15? What about 16? Right? On what basis do you determine this age limit? And why 18? Why 18 specifically? Are people who are 18 years old really able to make good and informed decisions today? Is that the argument that we're going to use? This is all arbitrary at that point. You have to have some kind of way to ground the morality of acts beyond just what society determines. You have to have things like the natural law or what the church teaches. And if he doesn't believe the natural law, and if he doesn't believe what the church teaches, why is he a cardinal? I mean, go elsewhere. You're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong church. What are you doing here? All right. There are people living in intimate love relationships that is expressed sexually. Are we really going to say that this is worthless? Nobody's saying that they're worthless or that this is worthless. Their love for one another isn't worthless. What is not good, we're not talking about worthless, is their sexual expressions towards one another. We're saying that is not good. Can they love each other in a platonic way with, friendships and stuff like that, in a healthy way, a ordered and godly way? Yes. And we're not saying that that is worthless. What we're saying is that same-sex acts, sexual acts towards one another, are not worthless. They are immoral. They are disordered. They are against God's will. That's what's being said. So he's setting up a straw man here and knocking it down, because everybody's going to say, well, no, they're not worthless. But that's not on the table. That's not in question. Sure, there are people who want to see sexually limited, who want to see sure, there are people who want to see sexuality, limited to procreation. But what do they say to people who can't have children? He's a cardinal of the church and he's straw manning the Catholic position this badly? What? How did you get ordained a deacon, let alone made a bishop and then elevated to a cardinal, if you don't know basic answers to general questions like this? Shameful of a cardinal of the church to not know the answer to this and to straw man the Catholic position this badly. All right, so let's take this apart. Are we limiting sexuality to procreation? No, we're not. The Catholic Church is not doing that. The unitive act is also important, incredibly vital, in fact. So no, nobody is saying that sexual love is limited to procreation in the Catholic Church. What about people who can't have children? That is not if it's between a husband and a wife, and the wife is sterile or something like that, that's not immoral for them to engage in sex. That's not the church's position. The church's position isn't to say you can't engage in sex unless it is procreative. Otherwise, it would follow that people who are sterile are unable to have sex. That is not the church's position. The position is that the act should be ordered to procreation. But if there's some kind of defect, some kind of problem with a person's body, that's not on them. I mean, now if a person voluntarily sterilized themselves, there's a problem in that act. But later on, if this is something like irreversible or something like that, later on, any kind of sexual acts, no, they're not in sin at that point for expressing themselves sexually in a marriage, right, within the confines of the marriage. So that is the worst straw manning of the Catholic position of sexuality that I've heard in quite a long time. I expect this from somebody who is a non-Christian. I don't expect this from a Catholic, let alone a cardinal of the church. I think he should be embarrassed for even saying that. Mark's comments are part of a growing push within the German church for changes to the catechism. Right. Earlier this month, Bishop Basing, I guess it's kind of the text is kind of far from me. Marx's successor as chairman of the German Bishops' Conference agreed with the journalist's assertion that no one adhered to the church's teaching that sexuality should only be practiced within marriage. Well, that's a problem then. That's the issue. And again, if this is up for grabs, wouldn't that mean anything is up for grabs? Everything is up for grabs? And if you want to say no, well, not everything is up for grabs. Okay, upon what basis do you say everything is not up for grabs? If we've thrown away natural law and we've thrown away the authority of the magisterium, what are we left with? Everything is up for grabs at that point. You don't have divine revelation that you can use, and you don't even have natural reason that you can use at this point. He was speaking to participants in the German synodal way, voted in favor of draft documents calling for same-sex blessings and revision of the Catechism or the Catholic Church's teaching on homosexuality. Another prominent European church leader was asked by German Catholic News how he dealt with the church teaching that homosexuality is a sin. He replied, "I believe that this is wrong, but I also believe that we are thinking ahead in doctrine here. The way the Pope has expressed himself in the past, this can lead to a change in doctrine." No, it cannot. It most certainly cannot. And I think I may have lost my my video here, so I apologize if I have. And please let me know in the chat too if I did lose my video there. Might be able to fix that real quick. Let's see here. Let me check. One second. If not, I'll just do. Yeah, there we go. I was about to say I'll just do, audio only if we have to, but let's continue. He replied, "I believe it's wrong, but I also believe that the Pope has expressed himself in the past. This can lead to a change in doctrine." No, it can't. Doctrine can develop. Certain doctrines can develop. Doctrines can change in that sense if they are non-definitive. But we're talking about an issue that is definitive. So no, you can't have a change in doctrine here any more than you can have a change in doctrine on the morality of theft or something like that. Because I believe that the sociological scientific foundation of this teaching is no longer correct. But this isn't based on sociological reasons. That's not the reason for this teaching by the church. That's not it. First of all, there's non-sociological reasons that we can say that same-sex sexual acts are immoral that are based on the natural law. And moreover, and more importantly, the magisterium has definitively taught the immorality of these acts. So again, straw manning and derailing the conversation. It's clear to me that none of these individuals are familiar with the magisterium and how it works, which is scary because they're members of the magisterium. Not that you have to really understand the magisterium in order to be a member, but you sure should if you are. But I mean, this is part of the problem. Is I've noticed the vast majority of Catholics, including clergy, do not know how the magisterium works. They don't have an even basic understanding of the magisterium. They may think that they do, but they often don't. If you were to ask, okay, what are the various organs of the magisterium? They'll usually miss one of them. What are the different modes in which that it can teach? They'll often miss some parts there as well. Which Which authoritative teachings can be reformed and which cannot be. They generally can't answer those kinds of questions. And how do you objectively identify definitive versus non-definitive teaching, stuff like that? They often don't know. And so because they don't know these things, they make wild statements like, well, there could be a change in doctrine here. No. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you, but that's most certainly not the case in this discussion. Okay, let's see. Goes on to talk about the Catechism. Cardinal Marx celebrated a mass marking 20 years of queer worship and pastoral care in Munich earlier this month. What? That's just using the liturgy for propaganda to promote sin, and that's wrong. And in my opinion, people like that should be excommunicated. Anybody who is involved in something like this should be excommunicated. Cardinals down, everyone. I'm sorry. I don't even think there should be a warning given. I don't think that they should be given a second chance. If you're that far off, you should not be given a second chance. You could be given a second chance in the sense that you obviously have the opportunity to repent and be a member of the flock. But I don't think that people like that should even be given a second chance in ministry. Unfortunately, it's not up to me, right? Unfortunately, I'm a nobody when it comes to removing somebody from office. Those who are people who could remove them from office, unfortunately, don't share the same perspective, and so we just kind of have to deal with the shepherds we're given at the moment, which it's not very encouraging. But I do think that God allows for that in his providence. So in his interview with Stern, Marx was asked about the Mass and whether homosexuality was recently still considered a sin in the church. He said, homosexuality is not a sin. Full stop. It is a Christian attitude when two people, regardless of gender, stand up for each other in joy and sorrow. What? It's a straw man, and again, a rabbit trail. Nobody is saying that it's not a Christian attitude for two people of the same gender to stand up for each other in joy and sorrow. That's not on the table. That's not in the discussion. The question is, these two people who have the same gender, should they be expressing sexual acts towards one another? That's the question, not this. What? I have to honestly wonder, is he deliberately trying to mislead people, or is he this warped in his understanding of the conversation? Both of them are reprehensible. Whether he intends to derail the conversation this badly or not, I don't care about the intentions anymore, because it's like you're wrong and harming souls either way. So it doesn't matter what your intentions are. Homosexuality is not a sin. Well, actually, expressing same-sex acts by people of the same sex towards one another is a sin. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's not a question of people of the same gender standing up for each other in joy and sorrow. That's not what homosexuality is. Why did you just redefine what homosexuality is? You can do this. Two people of the same gender standing up for each other in joy and sorrow. You could do that without having any kind of sexual acts towards one another. That's not the definition of homosexuality, and you know it. It's like saying, is gluttony a sin? Well, you know what? I think that looking at tacos is never a bad thing. What? Looking at tacos is not the definition of gluttony. You just completely redefined what homosexuality is here. And again, that's a rabbit trail and a straw man. I speak of the primacy of love. Nobody is denying the primacy of love. Why, again, derail the conversation like this? Nobody is saying love isn't preeminent. We believe that. Okay, we have read 1 Corinthians. We're aware of that. That's not the question. The question is, are same-sex acts towards people of the same sex, right? Are sexual acts of people of the same sex moral or immoral? That's the question, especially in sexual encounters. Okay, again, we all affirm the primacy of love in sexual encounters. That has nothing to do with but are sexual acts by people of the same sex a proper use of one's ability to express intimate and sexual acts, right? That's the question. But I must admit that 10 or 15 years ago, I myself could not have imagined that one day I would celebrate the service in this way. Now, I was very much looking forward to it. Well, if that's true, and I'll take him at his word, well, I'm so sorry to hear that. It sounds like you've been deceived by evil. I'm so sorry to hear that, that at one point you had the sensibility to be opposed to this, but you no longer have it. I'm very sorry to hear that. It sounds like Satan has been working on misleading you for a long time and has been successful here. And I hate to hear that. Cardinal Marx interviewer noted that there was a rainbow flag before the altar at the Mass. Also, I think that is sacrilegious. He was asked whether Rome has contacted him about it. Doubtful. Doubtful. Um, though the See of Rome is the See of Unity and should be shepherding the universal flock and tending to its care, it seems like we're really failing at that right now. So, in the past few years, I have received several letters on the subject, but I think I am doing the right thing, he said. Sorry, letters aren't good enough. Excommunication is what's needed here. I felt freer. I don't want to hear about the Vatican sending letters warning people. I want to see action. Words mean nothing. Words are cheap. Actually put teeth behind it. Start removing people from ministry. Then you won't have shenanigans like this in the church. I felt freer to say what I think in recent years. I imagine you do. And I want to move church teaching forward. I imagine he feels freer because there are less consequences now for error. The church is also changing, moving with the times. Yes, but that doesn't mean that this can change or move with the times. LGBTQ plus. Wow. People are part of creation and loved by God. Of course they are. Nobody is saying that they aren't. If you're saying that same-sex acts are immoral, that is not to say that these people aren't part of God's creation and aren't loved by God. That's not in dispute. And we are challenged to stand against discrimination. Nobody is saying otherwise. The Catechism of the Catholic Church affirms that. It says that there shouldn't be discrimination against them. But is it discrimination to say that their acts, sexual acts towards one another, are immoral? That's not discrimination. Is it discrimination to tell a person that they shouldn't steal? No, that's not discrimination. Why redefine the term discrimination like that? Again, that's what they do. They'll take terms, redefine them, completely go down a rabbit trail, derail the conversation. Again, whether it's intentional or not, I don't know. I don't care. You're misleading people either way, so it needs to stop. And I think these people need to be disciplined. Do I think that they're going to be disciplined? Probably not. Probably not. We have to at this point say, you know what? The people who have the authority to discipline individuals like this, if they fail to do so, they'll give an account to God. All I can do is do my part. But as far as them, well, they'll give an account to God for failing to do what they need to do. The church may be slower in some things, but this is a development that is happening everywhere. Again, I don't think that any development can be made to the doctrine. Most companies just a few years ago would not have accepted only homosexual board members. Absolutely irrelevant to the question. When the interviewer said that no company defined homosexuality as a sin in its statutes, also irrelevant, Marx said, "What is it with you and sin all the time?" Spoken like a true person who doesn't have a formed conscience or an awareness of the gravity of sin in Scripture. I honestly have to question: have any of these people actually read the Bible? I really have to. Obviously, they have some kind of exposure to the Bible, clearly. But what I'm saying is, have they really sat down and read the whole thing? I doubt it, because I don't think that you could read the Bible and come away with that that comment. What is it with you and sin all the time? It has to be about well, my retort would be, what is it with you and the homosexual agenda all the time? That would be my retort. It has to be about the quality of relationships. Nobody is objecting to anything about the quality of a relationship. Absolutely irrelevant. The issue has not been adequately discussed by some in the church. You are right. Again, it's absolutely irrelevant to the question. But sin means turning away from God, from the gospel, and you can't impute that to all who people who live same-sex love, and on top of that say away with them. Nobody is saying away with them. That's not what is being said. And nobody is saying that we impute, let's see, sin means turning away from God. I agree with the definition somewhat. It doesn't necessarily mean turning away from God entirely. It could be turning away from what God has commanded, right? Because a person could still be, open to God, but disobeying him. And that's still sin. Um, so sin means turning away from God. Not exactly. I understand why you would have that definition, but I don't think that's an adequate definition. And you can't impute that to all people who live same-sex love. You can't impute that to the acts that they are expressing towards one another. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's like saying you can't impute turning away from God to anybody who engages in theft. Okay, but the act that they're when they engage in theft, that is turning away from God's commandment. Sure, yes, you can. Does that mean that their entire life is disordered and their entire life is against God and turning away from God? No, but that area where they're turning away from God's commandments is bad enough and needs to be dealt with. Marx also asked if he has ever blessed a same-sex couple. It's not whether or not you can bless the couple, it's whether or not you can bless their immoral acts towards one another. He replied, a few years ago in Los Angeles, after a service where I preached on unity and diversity, 2 people came to meet me and asked for my blessing. I did it. And by the way, I also don't think that we can speak of 2 people of the same sex as a couple. I don't even think that that's a proper way to speak of them. But we'll table that for the moment. 2 people came to me and asked for a blessing. I did it. Well, I think he should be excommunicated for that. With this kind of admission, if you're a shepherd of God's church and you're committing this kind of grievous sins, you should no longer be in ministry. But again, it's not up to me, so I imagine he'll remain in ministry. This was not a wedding ceremony, after all. Who cares? Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Does not matter. Irrelevant. We cannot offer the sacrament of marriage. Irrelevant. 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 Nobody is asking whether or not you. Well, I guess there are some people asking whether or not you could offer them the sacrament of marriage. Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad you concede that you can't. But that still has nothing to do with the fact of whether or not you should bless their union. I'm personally not asking, well, do you think that you could give them sacrament of marriage? That's not what I'm asking. My question would have been, why do you think it's okay to bless their union? When this union includes acts that are contrary to the natural law and contrary to the definitive teaching of the church. The Vatican Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith reaffirmed that the Catholic Church does not have the power to bless unions of people of the same sex. The Vatican statement issued with the approval of Pope Francis sparked protests in the German-speaking Catholic world, right? And I would have excommunicated every one of them. Several bishops expressed support for blessing of same-sex couples, while churches displayed LGBT pride flags. I would have excommunicated every one of the priests there too. I don't understand why wolves are allowed to remain in God's flock. At the same time, I know that Jesus said that would happen. Jesus spoke about how you would have wheat among the tares and, tares among the wheat. you would have this mixed community. That doesn't mean that it's okay to just allow it to be that way fully, right? I mean, there is clearly a purpose for church discipline according to Jesus in Matthew 18. But that we would still have these problems and people who are in the flock that are wolves and tares among the wheat and stuff like that. Jesus warned us that we would have that, so I'm not surprised. I mean, some people are just so scandalized by this, they just wonder, how could this be Christ Church? Have you ever read Jesus? Jesus told you that this would happen. So I would question your formation if you think that this means that the Catholic Church isn't a divine institution or something like that. I would really question your formation at that point and say you need to go back and read the New Testament and the Old. Priests and pastoral workers across Germany held a day of protests. Marx interviewers suggest at one point that the cardinal himself had no sexuality. This was incredibly inappropriate. Why are they discussing the cardinal's sexuality? Why is the cardinal entertaining discussions about his sexuality? A bishop should be above reproach, and any discussion of sexuality is inappropriate for a man who is celibate. So I felt this was out of line of the interviewer and the cardinal to express, and I have to ask, why did he entertain this? Is he trying to let us know in some kind of indirect way that he himself has a same-sex orientation, but he just doesn't act on it? Otherwise, why even bring this up? You wouldn't have that if you're having a conversation with a heterosexual male, that wouldn't come up. That just wouldn't come up. Of course, I am, like everyone else, a sexual person, said the 68-year-old church leader. Hold on, let me fix this. Looks like it messed up on me again. Not sure exactly why, but fix that there. Of course, I am, like everyone else, a sexual person. Okay. Why are we having that discussion with a celibate cardinal? Said the 68-year-old church leader, I have a sexuality even though I'm not in a relationship. But that doesn't answer, are you expressing that sexuality with someone? Because right, you can express that sexuality with somebody and not be in a relationship, but that would be immoral of a person who's celibate. So nobody. I'm not asking at this point, are you in a relationship? I'm now having to ask, but are you expressing that sexuality with somebody? And even if he's not, even if the cardinal is completely, faithful to his celibacy, why are we having a discussion about your sexuality in this context? Are you trying to intimate that you have the same orientation as well? Why would this even come up? Is my question here? Why did he even entertain this thing? I don't see how any heterosexual male would have entertained that conversation. I also don't think that any heterosexual male, there might be a few, I'm not saying that, all heterosexual males are this way, but I don't know any heterosexual male that is so focused on reforming the church's teaching. To me, it seems like those who obsess over it are people who are doing so because they're trying to justify their own orientation in some way. Again, I'm not saying that applies to every single individual. I imagine it doesn't. I imagine there's exceptions. But I think it's generally the case that people who are so focused on issues involving same sex is because it hits home for them. It hits home for them. And they're looking to somehow justify whatever they're struggling with. I think that's often the case. Again, please don't take me the wrong way. I don't think that that's the case for everybody. And it doesn't mean that they're acting on it just because they have the orientation. I'm not automatically saying that they're acting on it. And it doesn't mean that you're in sin by just having that orientation, right? The sin comes whenever you start to act on it and entertain it. Merely having same-sex orientation is not a sin. It is a result of the fall. It's an effect of sin. It's a result of original sin. It's not part of God's creation. and the order of creation. It's a disorder. But one is not culpable, morally culpable, for merely having that inclination. The culpability comes whenever you act on the inclination. That's the problem. So again, I'm not imputing culpability to everybody who's struggling with this. I'm not saying that everybody who's always focused on this topic has that orientation themselves. No, I'm more nuanced than that. But I do want to say, generally speaking, I think often the case is people who have this orientation are the ones that are so focused on reforming the church's position here, because it hits home for them. So, yeah, like I said, I found many aspects to this interview incredibly troubling. I think that he should be disciplined. I don't have any expectations that he's going to be disciplined. So it is what it is. You just have to recognize the fact that sometimes we have bad shepherds in the Catholic Church. Jesus spoke of the existence of that. Even in Jesus's day, we had Judases. I don't think that that's going to be different today. I think in fact it would be worse, especially as the church continues to progress throughout history. I think that it will most certainly get worse. That being said, in my opinion, none of that invalidates the claims of the Catholic Church. But just because it doesn't invalidate the claims of the Catholic Church doesn't mean it's not sad to see, doesn't mean it's not harming souls that we shouldn't speak out against it. We, in fact, should. All right. That's going to do it, y'all. I do have a big announcement. I'm not going to mention it on this show, but I am going to give that announcement tonight. So look for a stream tonight with a big announcement, and you won't be disappointed. It's not clickbait, and it's not because of April Fools. it's a real announcement. So, all right, y'all. We'll see y'all later. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to check me out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology, or hit the join button here on the channel on YouTube if you want to support what I'm doing here. I would greatly appreciate it if you do. All right. See you later. God bless.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now.